Hey everyone, Cool Kid here, and welcome to the first episode of the Explaining Every Exalted series. If you want to give the actually interesting episodes a watch, the playlist will be in the description, but this video serves to set up some important ground rules. If you already know how Exalted weapons work broad stroke, you can skip this introduction, but do know I am going to establish a lot of basic information here, so if you aren't confident in your grasp of the subject, this video might be helpful. So, for our debut episode, let's discuss a few fundamental questions. What is an Exalted weapon? What traits and mechanics unify them, and what limitations do they have? In simplest terms, an Exalted weapon is a weapon that is accessed through an ability, with its base damage scaling with your Warframe's power strength. Activating the ability grants you the weapon, which normally replaces its corresponding normal weapon while active. So, for example, while Excalibur has Exalted Blade active, he cannot use his normal melee weapon, though his other two weapons are still usable. Exalted Blade will still drain energy over time if he's using his primary or secondary though, so keep that in mind. Exalted weapons that provide passive benefits while active, like Serene Storm's damage reduction or Hysteria's invincibility, must also be actively equipped to provide their benefits. These abilities are typically channeled, meaning they drain energy over time and prevent you from getting energy from sources like Xenaric's Wellspring or Energy Pizzas. In fact, the only things that actually do work are Energy Orbs, Rage, and Hunter Adrenaline. You might notice I say normally, and trust me, you'll be hearing that quite a bit throughout this series. A few of these weapons, like Artemis Bow and Noctua, consume energy per shot, meaning you can still gain energy from those aforementioned sources while they're active. Because this isn't really the norm, I'll be sure to point it out when it happens moving forward. Even though these abilities only consume energy per shot, they are still counted as channeled for things like Arcane Intention, and on top of that, they still prevent you from becoming invincible while in your operator if they're active, so be careful. Exalted weapons are modded separately from other weapons, and come with a catalyst pre-installed. They do have some really important differences from normal weapons though, beyond what we've already discussed at least. Across all Exalted weapons, they cannot generate their own set bonuses, with the exception of the Sacrificial set, and do not contribute to the bonus of a set either, but they can take advantage of a set bonus if it's been built for another weapon. So, for example, if Excalibur builds up the Gladiator set on his regular melee and then switches to Exalted Blade, he can benefit from his other melee's Gladiator set buff. Do keep in mind that the combo counter for Exalted Blade and Excalibur's regular melee are separate, so the buff will eventually expire if you don't go back and forth between the two to maintain it. In the same vein, Ivara's Artemis Bow can benefit from the Vigilante mod set if the set bonus is applying to her regular primary weapon. Ivara can even place the Vigilante set on her Sentinel's weapon to grant the set bonus to both her primary weapon and Artemis Bow, though the same mod can't contribute to the set bonus twice if it's placed on both the Sentinel weapon and the regular primary. As for other restrictions, Amalgam mods and the old Acolyte mods are not usable on Exalted weapons, which is a huge deal. This means many staple mods like Blood Rush, Weeping Wounds, Argon Scope, and Hydraulic Crosshairs are all not usable on any Exalted. Even the Galvanized variant of Scope and Crosshairs aren't usable because they're still considered the same mod, just upgraded. Exalteds also can't use weapon arcanes, and don't benefit from the arcanes placed on your regular weapon in the corresponding slot, including Zaw and Kitgun arcanes. There are a few important exceptions to this rule though. Arguably the most important is Secondary Outburst, as the critical chance and damage buff it provides also applies to Exalted weapons that occupy the secondary slot, like Regulators, Noctua, and Glory. In a similar vein, Mark of the Beast on Glaives also applies its boost in status and crit chance to secondary Exalteds. Exodia Might can also be triggered by Exalted melees, but said melees don't actually gain the lifesteal unfortunately. Fortunately, Exalteds can benefit from arcanes placed on the Warframe that affect the weapon slot they occupy, like Arcane Precision, Strike, and Rage. The stats between the Prime and Standard versions of an Exalted weapon are the same, normally, and as abilities they can actually damage enemies through Limbo's Rift. Exalted's being abilities also means that all of the affinity from an Exalted weapon's kills will go to the Warframe, as they're considered ability kills. Real quick, I also want to talk about aura mods. Generally speaking, using Growing Power is probably the safest bet, as the 25% boost in strength is helpful both for the Exalted weapon's base damage and other abilities. Steel Charge is also a good aura though, as it grants 4 more capacity and is abnormally high in damage for a weapon-specific aura at 60%. Worthy Camaraderie is also a good aura for headshot-heavy Exalteds like Neutralizer and Concentrated Arrow Artemis Bow. Ready Steel, Empowered Blades, and Swift Momentum can also be nichely useful, primarily if you're focusing on heavy attacks. Combat Discipline also has some very interesting uses, as the self-damage it inflicts can proc on-damage arcanes, like Arcane Avenger, as well as nourish his Viral Retaliation mechanic. For frames like Avara and Cyto 9 who don't take that much damage on account of being invisible, you can use this aura to benefit from many on-damage effects you'd normally struggle to activate. Just be careful and make sure you've got a way to heal, or you'll probably kill yourself. Another topic I want to go over real quick is Archon shards, as well as Archon mods. Kind of like with auras, power strength is a very safe bet here, as it boosts the exalted weapon's damage and the effectiveness of other abilities. For melee specifically, melee critical damage on red shards is a very powerful effect, especially if you can upgrade to purple shards, which provide double the bonus, provided your max energy is high enough. Secondary exalteds benefit a lot from a secondary critical chance on red shards, and similar to melees, they benefit even more from the enhanced version of this effect on orange shards, provided you can spare the resources to make them. Primary exalteds can benefit from the status chance boost on red shards, but it's admittedly more niche than what melees and secondaries get. Fortunately, purple shards grant them access to increased electric damage, which can be a sizable bump in power. While this may be a bug, exalted weapons do not currently benefit from the ability damage stat that the secondary color shards provide. Moving on to Archon mods, exalted weapons can also meet the requirements for their secondary effect, as they're counted as abilities. This allows them to inflict double heat procs, trigger energy regeneration, inflict corrosive alongside toxin, and increase energy orb drop chance, provided the right elements are modded onto the exalted itself. As one last note, they also don't seem to benefit from augments that grant elemental damage, like Shock Trooper, Thermal Transfer, or Smite Infusion, though this might be a bug as well. Fortunately, Nourish does work correctly and applies its viral damage like normal. Alright, last thing for all exalteds is that Riven mods don't generate for them, which is kinda obvious I feel like, but I thought I'd bring it up. For exalted melees specifically, we've got a lot of stuff to go over. First up is the stance, which is exclusive to each exalted weapon. It can't be swapped out for any other stance, and doesn't contribute to your overall mod capacity either. It unlocks new combos as you rank up the ability, which happens as you rank up the warframe itself. Like I said earlier, Acolyte mods aren't usable, so stuff like Blood Rush and Weeping Wounds are off the table. Combo duration mods also aren't usable, aside from Drifting Contact for whatever reason. Power Spike from Naramon does affect exalted weapons though, and on the topic of combo count, if you have any weapon that pauses combo when holstered, like the Zorus or Tenet Grigori for example, your combo count will reset every time you whip out the exalted, so do not do that. As you might be able to guess, this is to prevent you from building up the Gladiator set bonus on one of those weapons and then just sitting on it forever. The combo counter also does not increase the damage of exalted weapons, except for one major exception. For whatever reason, Baruch's Desert Wind actually does benefit in damage from the combo counter, but we'll cover that more in his episode. Beyond that though, the combo counter is pretty much just for heavy attacks, which can be nichely powerful, especially with the advent of Tennokai. Secondaries and primaries are much simpler. Basically, the only thing about them when compared to melees that makes them unique is that they have no Exilis slot. Yeah, real compelling section, I know. I do want to make an important note real quick though. Unlike regular weapons, exalted weapons are confined to the warframe that wields them, which makes them pretty unique to talk about. As such, we're going to be discussing not only the exalted weapons themselves, but also the kits that surround them, alongside other mechanics like companion buffs, arcanes, and even the Helminth. I also want to make it clear that my goal with this series is not to tell you how to play the game, but rather to give you the pieces of the puzzle and let you put them together yourself. I know this will be somewhat controversial, but I don't plan on showing builds in this series. If the videos do their job well, you shouldn't even need them. I don't want to just tell you what to do. I want to show you your options, explain their pros and cons, and let you decide for yourself what you want to do. These videos will still contain plenty of my opinions, sorry, but know that the spirit of education over instruction is at the core of this series. Alright, that covers everything you'll need to know for now. We'll have another check-in later to explain how pseudo-exalteds and stat sticks work, but for the time being, don't worry about that stuff. So, without any more delay, let's get into our first exalted weapon. One so iconic, it's the whole category's namesake.